Hey loves, welcome back to the Bits of Bri Podcast. I'm Brianna K, joined by my co-host Ashley Aaron.
Hi, guys.
How are you? How was your weekend?
Good. I can't believe you just said co-host. That feels so fancy. I love that.
You're my co-host. That's
I
it
love
is what it
it.
is at this point.
I had a great weekend. The weather here is beautiful. It's freezing today. We're sitting outside because we might talk about some spicy things today, and we can't have the kids hearing since they're homeschool. My weekend was good. I want to know how your weekend was because you are glowing. You
I
look
I had a
amazing.
I had a fun weekend. We'll leave it at that. I had a fun weekend. Okay. But yeah, we're gonna get spicy today. So this is your warning now. This is a not safe for work, not safe for kids podcast. Like we're gonna be talking about adult things.
Mhm.
Specifically a question I get in my DMs all the time of other women who are either on the brink of divorce or recently divorced saying, please, can you give me tips for sex after divorce? So I'm going
Mhm.
to get us started with just some statistics because I
Okay.
find all this stuff to be really interesting. I'm kind of a data nerd and
Mhm.
I'm curious, Ashley, like if you could guess around these things, what do you think percentage wise is the current divorce rate? Like over 50% or under 50%?
Over.
I was kind of wondering that too, because I feel like I've heard so many people like COVID increased the divorce rate for sure.
Yes.
It
Yes.
actually, though, this is 2025. The current divorce rate is 41% for first marriages.
Okay. The fact that you have to clarify that is so funny to me.
Well, it did go on to say that like second marriages and third marriages have an even higher divorce rate. So I
Oh,
think maybe
wow.
like the overall divorce rate might sit at 50%, but first marriages is 41%. But then this is what I kind of found interesting because I'm like, maybe this is why the divorce rate is a little bit lower than the 50%. What do you think the average age is in the US that people are getting married?
30?
So yeah, that for men it's actually 30, for women it's
Okay.
28.
I would have thought
So
men were way older than that, actually. For
it's
some reason.
average,
Okay.
right? Like, these are all
Okay.
averages. So I think, like, it was even saying, like, Utah is a much different statistic than, like, Louisiana. Like, it was
Yeah,
kinda saying
that
it's
makes
very different.
sense.
This one, though, because I think, like, this is then what people always ask about when it's like, "Okay, if it's after your divorce," but this is just overall. What do you think the average number is? So sexual partner for people in the US.
Men and women or
Yeah, this is men and
yeah,
women. 'Cause I
13.
agree, I would think men have a much higher number.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying 13 because I feel like men have a much higher number.
Okay, it says between 10 and 11.
Okay. Okay.
And so the reason I feel like I wanted to kinda look at the data for all of this is because, a lot of time, like, women, when they write me these, they'll be like, "I've only ever been with my husband," right? Or like, "My husband is the
Mhm.
only person I've been with for the last 10 or 15 years," which, by the way, the average marriage duration is 7 years. So there really is something to the
Ooh.
7-year itch.
I was just
I
about
think
to
it's
say that.
yeah,
There
which I think
really
is
is something to that. Okay.
yeah, there really is something to the 7-year itch. So I think people get married early because the average age actually for a divorce is 30 years old. So what that tells me in looking at this data, right, is there are a lot of people getting married later, but it's like the people getting married younger where it probably was,
Mhm.
potentially the only person they've ever been with are then getting divorced around 30.
Okay.
Right? And
Yeah, that makes
so I
sense.
think people have so much anxiety and so many questions about that. So we're going to dive into all of that on the podcast today. Again, why this is a not
Let's do
safe
it.
for work podcast.
You've been warned. And by the way, since everyone thinks I'm only obsessed with Christmas, not only am I sitting outside because we're talking about spicy things, I have my spring cup, my spring nails. I swear you guys, it's not a sickness. I just love Christmas. I mean, if that's the worst people can say about me, I'm not doing so bad, okay? I
I
just
love
love
you so hard
Christmas.
right now for addressing that, like why you had your Christmas tree behind you in the first few podcasts.
Okay, so we're talking about life after divorce, specifically post-divorce sex. How do you feel
Yeah.
about that, Brie?
Well, I mean, the entire intention of this podcast, right, is if I could have had this, what message did I need to hear in those first few months after the divorce. And I think what I wish someone could have told me was just work on yourself in every sense of the word. Like, love yourself in every sense of the word. Like, do not seek out any external male validation for how low you're feeling right now. And, I say that with, I think everybody comes out of their divorce in a different place, and maybe divorces are on a different timeline. I think the timeline for mine was relatively fast. Like, we had the conversation like end of February, beginning of March. All the paperwork was signed by the end of May. We were living separately. The only thing we were truly waiting on was the judge to just stamp it and say it's approved. So, really, like,
Yep.
May was the disconnect for me. I think other people, if they've had a drawn out 2-year long divorce process, have been doing therapy all of that time, they might enter the dating world in a very different healed place. I, speaking for myself, was not in a healed place at that point.
Mhm.
So I think I was seeking romantic validation. Like, I wanted to be romanced, and I was not healed enough to be ready for all of that. I think maybe what I would have been ready for was just some like fun, lighthearted dinner dates to get back
Yes.
into like flirty banter with somebody and
Yeah.
have like fun conversation with adult males. Like, I almost wish I had approached it of like, I'm just going to go out and try to make some fun adult male friends, is actually how
Yes.
I wish I could have approached the situation instead of how I did. I think that would have been really insightful for me and like helped me to have some socialization, but without any of the emotional attachment. And I think for women, sex for us is so different than it is for men. And I think it's like, something we have to feel really safe when we like enter into that. Like, I've heard this acronym for sex, and it's sacred energy exchange.
Mhm.
And if you're not in a good place, if you're really vulnerable emotionally, somebody can do a lot of damage to you during that. And vice versa.
Yeah.
Like, if that person
Yeah.
has ill intentions or has like a lot of trauma or emotional baggage, like all of that can be exchanged to you. So I think it is only kind of you to really make sure that you're in a really good, healed, loving place before you enter into a new relationship, a new commitment, any kind of sexual relationship with another person.
Mhm.
As much as you might be like, oh, this is exciting. I'm going to like be with somebody new. Like, I've only had this,
Yeah.
a lot of the letters I get or DMs I get is like, I've only ever been with my husband. So now I'm excited to like get out there and explore. And I think you should have excitement around it. Like, right? Like, sex
Yes.
is supposed to be full of pleasure and fun. And I mean,
Yep.
God designed our bodies. Like, the reason women have clitorises is one purpose, and that's for pleasure. Like, the
Yep.
clitoris is for pleasure. So clearly
Yep.
God made our bodies because we're supposed to enjoy sex. And I don't know why there's so much
Amen.
like guilt and shame that people have around that. And,
Mhm.
I do think like it should be fun and you should enjoy it. But I would just say, like, again, what I would tell myself is don't go out looking for a boyfriend immediately. Like, I wish I would have just focused on loving myself. And again, you can sexually love on yourself. There is like,
You
let's take
can.
away all the shame and stigma from that. Like, satisfy your sexual needs and desires yourself, but really work on yourself until you are ready to show up in a healed, healthy way where sex is really positive and pleasureful before you dive into anything.
Yes. And you know how much I believe in transfers of energy. So it makes sense that sexually, that is something you should be very, very cautious of letting somebody else's energy in. Like you said, if they're toxic, if they're not fully healed themselves, you don't want to take on anybody's bad juju. You just want to leave it right where they are. And there are so many fun things you can do. I mean, we could talk about toys and lubes and just so many things. I mean, there's just a market for everything now when it comes to pleasuring yourself. And there's no reason you shouldn't get back out there. But I love when you said you wish you would have just made male friends and just had that like companionship. Like, I just, that probably would have just been such great advice. Like, you don't have to just dive into a full fledged relationship, sex and all. Like, you can just go on dates and have a good time. And I know that nowadays people don't really talk about that as much. It seems like the dating apps are just for hooking up, but it's like if you find the right people, you can experience that where you're just like other adults to hang out with, people that you get to know, and they can just be friends. And I think that's a really safe place to start. And I think it's important to tell people that. And I think that you sharing your experience is going to help so many women as well, because you have really worked on yourself for 3 years. So you're coming from a much healthier place, giving good advice. And that's the whole point of this podcast, right? Like, we just want to help
Yes.
women who experienced what you experienced. Like, this is the podcast you wish you would have had when you first got divorced.
Yes. And it's funny you say that because when you're even talking about like on the dating apps and things like that, I listened to another podcast earlier today. It's
Uh-huh.
called the Man Talks podcast. A friend
Mhm.
recommended it to me, and it was such a good listen. It's actually designed for men. Like it gives men advice about dating. And I think like that's why having a male friend or male friends would have been so beneficial because you'd almost hear this kind of talk, right? Of like how they're talking about dating and like their approach to dating. And it was so helpful because if I was on the dating apps, because I recently got off of them,
Okay.
because I just feel like I know that God is going to put the man who I'm going to marry in my path. And I don't need to waste my energy on the dating apps. And that was so there was 2 things that I took away from this podcast. The first was like, don't be dating a ton of people. Like just focus your energy on the one that's like brings the most value that you know is like the right fit. Because if you're putting your energy out there with all these different people, you're wasting it instead of being ready for like the top, like most valuable client. It was kind of putting in a framework of marketing as dating
Mhm.
because it applies to both. And
Yeah.
so that I thought was really interesting. But the second thing it said that if I were to still be on the dating apps, I would do this. It is decide upfront what is your deal breakers
Okay.
and make that the headline on your dating profile. And one of the examples it gave was around like politics of like, if you
Okay.
are obsessed with Trump and you're only going to date somebody else who's obsessed with Trump too, that should be the top of your dating profile. Because one, you know that that's like what you want, that's what you're looking for. It's going to be a deal breaker for you. But
Okay.
two, energetically, it is saving you from meeting a person who you might like to do the same things. You might like to ski. You might both have, great like gym workout routines. You might like to go to the same restaurants, but then you find out that politically you're not aligned and it would never work. And here you are
It would
now
never work.
emotionally, yeah, enmeshed with a person that you like in a lot of ways, but in one of the biggest ways for you, like again, it's your biggest deal breaker, wouldn't work. And so now you've messed up your energy, you've messed up their energy. You probably feel some guilt around wasting their time. You're probably a little bit angry that you've
Yes.
wasted your time. And I was
Yes.
like, that is one of the smartest pieces of advice that if I could go back to myself then, I should have, done the reflecting really before I ever got on, a dating app of like, what's my biggest deal breaker? And, if I were to like get on one now, I'd be like, I'm looking to get married. Like, I'm not looking to fuck around and find
Mhm.
out, which some people
No.
on dating apps are, and that's fine. Like, if you want to do that, it's fine. Not me. Um,
Not me.
but like I would be upfront with that, right? Like, I'm looking for
Mhm.
marriage. So if you're the type of person that's like, I don't think I ever want to get married, right? Well, and I would put on there too of like, I want to be a stay-at-home mom. So I feel like that makes it very clear to somebody who's like, well, I don't want children. Like, obviously, like I'm a mom with kids, right? So, like,
Yes.
I
Yes.
think it sets the headline very clearly to only allowing in people's whose energy is the right fit for me and vice
Mhm.
versa.
Yep, you have to align.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Wait, so you're telling me there are men out there that have a podcast where they tell you to focus on one woman and where they tell you to put your deal breaker? I mean, that is so shocking, Brie. They I feel like they're doing the Lord's work, because that's half the battle with men. I had so many clients get divorced over politics in 2020. I had so many situations where women just refuse to believe the things that men tell them. And a lot of times, I feel like nowadays, with dating culture and apps, men just have too many options. So the fact that
Mhm.
they're telling men just focus on one, like, go all in on one, like, just see if it's really meant to be. That is amazing advice, and I'm just so happy to hear that it's, like, men telling other men that, and I love how
Yeah.
they added the business element to it as well, to say that it's also, like, marketing. It
Yeah.
makes sense.
I mean, it was a great we should try to have them on the podcast. Like, I think it would
Yes,
be yeah,
to have
yeah,
the male perspective. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah. It was really interesting. But yeah, no, I appreciated that. And that's definitely something I would, be telling 3 years ago me when I was exiting out of, my marriage. So, but I
Yeah.
also, to a point you brought up earlier that I feel like we should touch on, that I think is so sad to me. A like statistic I looked up that I didn't share earlier. How many women, if you had to give a percentage, do you think have never had an orgasm?
Hopefully not very high. Hopefully it's very low. 5 under 5%.
I wish. It says 15% of women
Oh
haven't
my
experienced an
gosh.
orgasm.
By
And this
themselves or with a partner or just with
yeah,
a
I think
partner?
it's overall, which and it
Oh
makes
my
me so
gosh.
sad because even on so it's Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
Yes.
The one girl, I'm blanking on what her name was, but that's what she talked about. It was like, she got married really young, like I feel like, in her teens, had 2
Yeah.
kids and was like, "I've never had an orgasm." And I mean, they were getting
Mhm.
divorced. And I'm kinda like,
I understandably so. It
"Man."
probably contributed. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I can't imagine. I can't
No.
imagine. And
So sad
so
for her.
I do just wanna talk about that because I think, one, that's something that I think is maybe hard for women to admit, and I think especially if you are married and your husband isn't doing that for you,
Mhm.
obviously, we should be making it very like, open to be having that conversation, like, if
Yep.
you aren't getting pleasure from your sexual relationship with your husband, that should be a really just open, honest conversation, but
Mhm.
for some reason, it's like the male ego, I think, gets in the way of, like, you can't tell him,
Yep.
you're gonna bruise his
Yep.
ego, and it just makes me so sad to think about that.
It
So,
does.
the other statistic I've found, it said 50% of women don't orgasm with their partner.
Wow.
Right. Which again, I
That's
feel like it's
so
like, are we not
sad.
having this conversation with them of like, you didn't get me off or like that's not
I
working for me.
mean, how did it even turn into a marriage if you couldn't talk about sex? Like that, you should be able to talk about that. But yeah, like if you can't talk about sex, how are you like, okay, first of all, we're not shaming anybody here. I understand sometimes you get married young and maybe you didn't feel comfortable talking about that, but let's hope and pray that you're at a point now in your marriage or your post divorce life where you realize that being able to talk about these things openly with a partner is like has to be done. It has to be done. But also, I think women should focus on being able to have an orgasm themselves. And then once you understand your own body, how your own body works, because for every woman it's different, then you can explain that to your partner and be able to help guide him so that both of you are getting everything that you want from the situation. It shouldn't just be him gaining pleasure, it should be both of you. And I could not imagine that poor girl. She had 2 children, and the whole time that they were having sex, she never had an orgasm. Like, that just makes me so sad for her. I really wanna hug her because and it's not uncommon. I think I shared this with you before. I had clients who were younger and they told me like, "How do you know if you're having an orgasm?"
Oh
And
my
I'm
god.
like, "I know, right?" And you can't just put it into words like, "Oh, you feel tingly or you feel this or you feel that," because different for everybody. But I would say if you're asking, how do I know if I've had an orgasm? You probably haven't, right? Like that's something
Right.
that you're gonna know. Once it
Right.
happens, you'll know what it is. But that's why here we can talk about different ways of getting there, and then you'll
Yeah.
be able to figure it out, right?
Right. And that's where I would say, like, obviously you can do it completely on your own, like with your own
Mhm.
personal touch. But
Yep,
I would say the thing that just as a divorced woman who, I'm very selective. Like I said, I want to feel safe. I want to be in a committed
yep,
relationship with somebody. So if I'm not, like, I've gotten a vibrator. Like I always joke, Buzz is my boyfriend. Buzz is my boyfriend. I have two
Buzz is why
buzzes,
you're
but like
glowing.
why you glow. Like, but really though, having an orgasm every single day, I mean, what there's a joke like the apple a day keeps the doctor away. Like I think an orgasm a day keeps the wrinkles at bay. Like it really like keeps you glowing and it's important. It's
It is
important.
important. Yes, it
And it's I
is.
also feel like there's just a lot with I get it like being a mom and there's so much stress and all of that. It's like you're not really in the mood, but I feel like it's the
Mhm.
same thing as working out. It's like keep your body healthy. You also have to keep your sexual health like up to
Yes.
par too.
Mhm.
And I think it is such a de-stressor for all the stress that you do feel.
Yep.
I
I
mean, I think there's
completely
a reason
agree.
why, like, I'm in a pretty zen place, and it's because the self love is important. I should have the glow up podcast. Actually, that one's missing. Ways to glow up, and that is like an orgasm every day. Self love,
Yes. Number 64.
number 64.
Absolutely. You have to go through and edit everything now, redo the whole thing. That's the most important one. It's anti-aging, de-stressing, it'll make you feel better, and if you've never experienced it on your own, how can you explain it to your partner? So, get to work, ladies. There's lots of things we
Exactly.
can do.
Exactly. Okay, so I know you've told me you use some toys. Is there one you would recommend to a girl out there who's like, where do I get started? Which one do I order?
Um, there are I think one that I like, I don't know the exact name of it. I shared this with you before. Steven always buys all of my stuff. Shout out to Steven, my husband. He's amazing. He even said, "You better give me my credit on the podcast. Don't act like you figured all this out on your own." I didn't. He researches all this stuff, so I don't even know the
Today's
name of.
podcast is sponsored by Steven.
He's gonna love that. He's gonna be so happy. Um, yes, oils, lubes, lotions, all of the things. But I would say that the one that I use, it's like pink. I think it's called like a rabbit something. I really like that one. But I've shared with you, I'm not a huge fan of a lot of like vibrators because I feel like they're really hard and they're just not, I prefer the real thing. But if you don't have the real thing as an option, or you just want to be safe on your own, I really like that one. We'll add it in the description box because I'm not sure the exact
Okay.
name. But what is your
Okay.
favorite that you use?
I mean, for me personally, like when I'm by myself, the way that I orgasm, I think it's important to like call this out because I think a lot of women think, oh, I'm in an orgasm because you see it in a movie from penetration.
Yes.
I personally have never orgasmed from penetration. Like that's
Okay.
just not, it's not that it doesn't feel good when I have a partner, but that's not the way that I orgasm. So
Okay.
the 2 that I have that I really like, it's kind of like a shaped like a flower, like it's almost like a stem with a flower. Again, it's
Okay.
the vibrations that, clitoral stimulation. And
Yep.
then the other one's almost like a little sucker, so it almost stimulates oral, like when you're getting oral sex.
Yeah.
And I feel like those are the 2 that's what works for me. So,
Yes. Those are
yeah.
the best. I would
Yeah.
say if you've never had an orgasm, start with those. I do love those. But everyone's different. Like we said, some it might be from clitoral stimulation, others it might be from penetration. Try different things, play around. I mean, there's so many to choose from and just figure out what you like. There's no
And
wrong answer here.
And I feel like, because like we've talked about this too, is sometimes it depends on how invested your partner is. Like you have a
Mhm.
partner who's doing all this research and finding these
Yes.
toys and things. And I think what goes along with that, like when you have a partner that is very invested in your pleasure, sometimes that's when like you have the partner who can get you to orgasm from penetration. Cause I've done a
Mhm.
lot of reading on it. A lot of it, like, there's nothing wrong with you as a woman if you can't orgasm that way. But
Nope.
sometimes it literally has to do with his size. Like, there is a
Yes.
difference. Like, sometimes too big isn't going to hit your G spot. The right size one will hit your G spot.
Yes.
Too small is not going
Yes.
to hit your G spot. So, like, sometimes it literally is just men are built differently. It's going to either hit it or it's not based on how you're built.
Mhm.
And
Yep. Or
each
if it's
woman has a
curved.
different depth of
Yes.
vaginal canal. So like there's differences and unless you like understand and do the research, you think that something could be wrong with you, but it's actually not. Like there's a lot of
It's
factors
not.
that all go into it. But a partner that might like be like more exploratory is going to be like, well, maybe with my fingers I can figure out where your G spot is, or
Yeah.
maybe with a toy we can figure out where your G spot is. Like there's just a lot I think that goes into it. But again, it's all about you have to be comfortable enough with that person to have these conversations.
Mhm.
It should be playful, it should be fun, it
Yes.
shouldn't be
Yes.
embarrassing. And you should know that like
Mhm.
silly moments are going to happen in the bedroom when you're like figuring
Yes.
stuff out,
Yes.
especially to
Yep.
like if there's any younger people listening to this, like it is not like a movie and it does not need to be performative and you know what I mean? Like it
Yes.
shouldn't be that way. Like
No.
it's about the two of you figuring each other out and being safe enough to explore all those different fantasies and things you want to try. So,
I agree.
yeah.
I agree. And a real man is not going to get turned off, ladies, so don't worry. Like, I promise you that man is just so happy that you are there and that you are naked, and he's just hoping that you don't change your mind. So be comfortable. Know that you're beautiful. I guarantee you he thinks you're 10 times more beautiful than you even realize. Like, men are so simple, and they're just so happy to be there, okay? So don't stress so much. We overthink it so much as women. We're like, "Oh my god, if I sit this way or if I do that, I'm going to look weird." Like, no. They're just so happy that you're there. So just take a deep breath, remember how you pleasured yourself and just go for it.
And that's I think why going back to the advice I gave earlier, because I get it. There's like especially if like you're divorced and you're like, I have 3 kids now and my body looks different, or,
Yep.
I'm not at the weight that I want to be.
Mhm.
All of those things, that's why like the glow up stuff I went through are so
Yes.
important because to your point, a man actually isn't going to care if you're 10 pounds
No.
heavier than in your brain when you're
No.
like where I would like to be. He's not thinking about that at all. But what he's going to pick up on is your energy and your confidence. And if you aren't in a good energy and you're not feeling confident and you don't have the love and respect for your body, then that's why you're having all these thoughts in your head that you're
Yes.
hesitating in the bedroom. Like you should feel so comfortable, so confident. Yes, I think the first time when you're with a person that like you're falling for and you're in this committed relationship and you're going to have sex for the first time, you're going to have a little bit of like nerves and anxiety,
Mhm.
but it should overall you should be excited and into it. And if you're not, I think that's your intuition telling you don't do this. Maybe it's not the right time.
Yes.
Maybe you need to do a little
Intuition.
more work on yourself. Maybe like literally, like that is what I would tell anybody for sex after divorce. Like if you aren't feeling into it, if you do not want to do this, if you're not feeling comfortable and confident and excited, don't do it.
Yep.
Work on yourself. Love yourself
Work on
first.
yourself. Always listen to your gut. You know I'm big on that, Brie. I'm always listen to your gut, listen to your instincts, listen to your intuition. Everything is going to guide you. And if you are second guessing it at all, if that is a good man, you change your mind, you change your mind. You're allowed to change your mind. You're not ready. He would probably rather you wait than to do something and then you regret it and then the relationship is ruined.
Yes.
Just work on yourself, feel confident. And you're right, after having kids, your body changes a lot. And yeah, just really work on your confidence, love yourself, and you're going to be so much better when you meet your partner or your person. You guys are both going to be healed, and the sex is going to be 10 times better because you're both confident and happy. And that is the
Mhm.
most attractive thing. You're so right. Like 10 pounds does not matter here and there. 10 pounds does not matter, but it's the confidence. Like I've seen, from doing hair and makeup, I've seen some of the most beautiful women, even when I did beauty pageants, beautiful women, and they're so insecure. And it's like there's nothing a man loves more than a confident woman of any
Mhm.
size. They're just
Yes.
drawn to that. That is just the most attractive thing to them. And I feel like any man listening can confirm that. Like confidence is huge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I feel like I should call out while we're on the topic of this, because I feel like, especially if there are younger girls
Steven's here.
listening, who is Steven?
Steven's here. He just got
Our
home.
sponsor's here.
Bree said you're the sponsor of the podcast, Steven. Go ahead.
Um, no, younger girls listening who, might be in a vulnerable place where they're like, yeah, I'm listening to this because I'm getting out of a bad breakup, like a long term relationship, divorce, all those things. I
Yep.
know we're talking about sex, but I do just want to make it very, very clear that just because you're dating somebody does not matter how much money they've spent on you, doesn't matter if they've bought you nice things, dinners, whatever it might be. You are under no obligation to give them anything sexually unless you are choosing to do so. Because, like, when I think back, because you were asking me, like, oh, think back to your younger self, I think that's almost why in my early 20s, I was not even going on dates and exploring more of what I liked or what would be interesting to me because I thought I might be under an obligation of like, if I date them for a certain amount of time, they're going to expect sex. Or like if, they do these nice things for me, are they expecting sex? So like if, let's even say somebody asks you like, will you be my date to a wedding? We're going out of town. It's like, if we're in a hotel room together, are they going to be expecting sex? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like there's
I
a
do.
lot of
Yeah.
things that I feel like if you're not comfortable doing that, which especially at that time, like I was so not confident, wasn't comfortable doing those things. So I was more just opting out. But I do feel like women should be empowered enough to feel like, no, I can go be social. No, I can go on dates and I'm under no obligation to have sex. Or like we're saying, if there's anything, if trust your intuition, if there's anything that you're like thrown off by or like this got weird, get out. Like you can leave. Call an Uber,
Yes.
get out. Like,
Mhm.
yeah.
God, I'm just so glad that this podcast exists because hearing you say that you felt that way when you were younger, I don't know where I got it from, Brie. I honestly don't. Maybe it was my mom. I'll have to call her after this and ask her and see. Maybe she'll remember. But I even tell you, like one of my favorite creators, Clark. She says it all the time, and we definitely need to add her to like our dream list of guests. Try to get her to come on here. If you guys know Clark, she's big on TikTok. She is this beautiful young woman. She's so intelligent. And one thing that she said in the video, people kept asking her, they're like, you date high value men. Mind you, she's a high value woman herself, but they were like, you date high value men. You go on these beautiful, extravagant dates. Do you feel obligated to hook up with them? She's like, "No, absolutely not." She's like, "Just because a man bought me some pasta and some wine does not mean he has access to my body." And when you literally say it like that out loud, it's wild to think. I don't care if you live in New York, I don't care if you live in Michigan, it doesn't matter if the pasta is $10 or $500. Like, no, he does not have access to your body just because he fed you and gave you a glass of wine. Like, that is so wild, and I feel like so many women feel that way, right? Like, "I went out with him, he paid for everything, like, now I'm obligated to do this." No, you are never obligated to, and I can promise you when I was younger, before I met my amazing husband and this was also at a different time, I'm older now, I get that, like, that was a different time in dating, but men would take me out, and there was they never expected anything. Just because they took me to dinner or took me to weddings or took me to things, like, they never expected anything in return. That's something you do because you're in a relationship, you're really attracted to each other, you're falling for each other, or you're already in love and you choose to do that. That's not a transactional thing. He didn't buy you something, so now you're putting out. Like, can we please just agree that that is such outdated beliefs? And I just hope and pray that some young girl hears this and realizes you don't have to do it. Like, I promise you don't. And if he gets mad, good girl, you dodged a bullet, run. Like, be
Yes.
happy.
That is honestly, that's probably like the universe giving you the best lesson of like red flag, leave him now. Like if he's putting pressure on you for anything sexually, get out.
Get
Also,
out.
what else are the things that this is like the biggest thing. There's like two red flag things guys say that any girl out there just run in the opposite direction. Cuz we know this, right? Like men will tell you the truth. Like men tell you
Yes,
exactly how it is. And
they
their
do.
actions are even truer, you know?
It's true.
So if a man says to you, "I'm not ready for a serious relationship," get out. He
Yep.
already knew. That's his nice little sugar-coated way of telling you, "You're not the one. You're not the one I'm gonna marry.
Yeah.
Not you.
Believe him.
Get
Believe
out.
him. Get out.
He's not ready." It doesn't matter, and you might sit there and be like, "No, I'll be able to change his mind, or maybe if I, like, date him
No.
for a year or 2, then he'll be ready." No.
No.
These guys, when they know it's the one, they're getting engaged within a couple months. Like, you're gonna waste
Yes.
your time, your heart's gonna get broken, don't do it. If they're not ready, they know that they're not ready and you're not the one, is exactly what they're telling you. They didn't add in the "you're not the one," but that is exactly what they're saying to you.
It's true. It's
The
true.
second one is, and I've learned this one the hard way. I've learned this one the hard way. If they tell you, "I'm worried I'm going to hurt you," or like, "You're so sweet, I'm probably going to hurt you," that's them being really honest about their personality type. They're gonna hurt you. That is
I
them
can't
being
believe
very,
it.
very honest that they are going to end up hurting you, and you should
Run.
leave. Run when they say that. Run, run.
Believe him when he says it. Yes.
Yeah, believe
And it's
him.
just crazy to me, Bree, that you say that men say that out loud. Like, that would be so wild to me if I heard a man say, I don't know, maybe I'm mean because I've never heard a man say, like, I I'm afraid I'm gonna hurt you. I think they're more afraid I'm gonna hurt them. But
I mean, at the end of the day, though,
yeah.
truthfully, that just shows, like, where you're at in your, like, femininity and your power, because every woman out there listening needs to remember, we have a portal to heaven between our legs. We should be treating ourselves as such, and men should be treating us as such.
Yes.
Like, you are the
Yes.
prize.
You just took the words right out of my mouth, Brie. I swear I was just about to say that, and I'm not saying you're not supposed to love and just adore your husband or your partner, but a man who treats you like he's the prize and like you're an option, no, girl, that's never gonna change. That's never gonna
No.
change, and it's nothing you did wrong. That's what young women always feel. I feel like when I was younger, I would think like, "Well, why didn't he like me?" or "Why like, was it something I did?" It's not because you aren't pretty enough. It isn't because you're not smart enough.
Mm-mm.
It's nothing to do with you. It is literally, and that's one thing you have such confidence in as you get older. It's everything to do with them. I
Yep.
promise it's everything to do with them. It has nothing to do with you.
No, that is exactly it, is men know that you're on too high of a pedestal for them. So that's why, because 'cause they're competitive. Like, think of how men are. Like, they're so competitive with everything, and when they know they're not good enough, they're
Mhm.
gonna tell you, and that's when you need to
Yeah.
run. It's the, "I'm not ready for anything serious." He knows he's
Yeah.
not good enough for you, he's lazy, he's not willing to put in the work, because any man, when they know you're the one, they don't care how much they have to work. They'll work day and night to be good enough for you, if you are the
Yes.
one, and that is the only
Yes.
type of energy we should be accepting. That is the
Yes.
energy that leads to happy relationships, is when a man is like, "You are the one, and I'm going to do whatever I need to change, be better, work harder, get whatever it is that I need to get together in my life to be good enough for you."
Yes. Yeah, 100%. It goes back to that. If you are his dream girl, he will do everything to be with you. And I'm telling you, when the men who can sense that they
There are
can't
men who
manipulate
come from
you.
different countries to
Yes.
see you.
Yes. Different
There are men,
religions, it doesn't matter.
literally, look back in the day, these men were building, like, castles and churches for women that they loved. Like,
Yes.
that's the type of energy that we need to be accepting. Not
By hand. By hand, they were building these things.
like,
Yes,
not
that
that he
is.
bought you pasta and wine, so now you need to put out. No,
I don't
no.
care if he bought you diamonds, girl. If you don't wanna put out, you don't put out. Like, I promise you he'll probably want you more. That's the
Yeah,
worst part.
you'll get way more than the
You'll
diamonds
get
if you
way
don't.
more. Goes back to, though, if you wanna put out, put out. If you wanna have sex, have sex. It's just it has to be you hold all of the power. Men are just happy to be there. I promise you it's that simple.
Well,
Men
I
are
think
so
women
simple.
have lost that. Somewhere along the way, that's getting lost.
It is. It's
Somewhere, like,
culture
why
nowadays. I asked Steven, because my husband, he'll have a lot of young guys that work for him, and they just have so many options, Bree. And it's not just their options within their state or within driving distance. They have access to everybody all over the world. And once you have money, you can travel, you can fly, you can do all of the things. It's almost like they have decision fatigue or something. There's so many to choose from. They just don't know. That's why I love that podcast that said, pick a woman, stick with her, just like the client, and you're gonna get the most value from it.
right.
Stop
Well, and
searching.
I think the flip side of that is, and I will take ownership in this, right? Because I think a huge mistake I made my first go around was that I was allowing 50-50 treatment. I was allowing, again, I was the breadwinner. It should not be that way. It doesn't work. In a healthy, like again, heterosexual male female relationship, that can't be the dynamic. I get that there's other people out there that might be in a different, more fluid relationship, but you're if you're a heterosexual male female relationship, the dynamic is off. It just is off. It does not work. Doesn't work.
Mhm.
It doesn't lead to
I
happiness. There might be some short-term blips of happiness, but it doesn't lead to long-term happiness. So,
I agree. I agree, and it's so funny because whenever a woman says this online, men go crazy and they expose themselves so much because it's
mhm,
always the toxic men who just wanna manipulate and use a woman who doesn't really have their best interests in heart, always the ones that come out like, "That's not true, and if you were a true partner, you would be willing to go 50-50." A true provider man, and you are his dream girl, will be offended at you even trying to help out financially, like they are the provider. They're there to take care of you emotionally, spiritually, financially. And then I promise you, those men, there's no 50-50 with them. It's not even an option. Do you remember that trend where the women would say to their husbands, I can't afford to pay the mortgage this month? It
yeah,
reminds me of
yeah,
that. I
yeah,
loved that, and they were like,
mhm,
"What do you mean? Like, you don't pay the mortgage," and it's so true, it's not even just about finances, it's so much deeper than that, but men need that to feel like they take care of you, that they love you, that they invest in you, and that's why the ones who are searching for the vitamins and the toys and thinking about what you need and anticipating your needs, it just benefits them in the long run. When you're happy and healthy and whole, you're gonna have a really good relationship.
right. And
So
I think there's an interesting line in all of this, right? Because I have to sit here and say, like, women should be able to, if you choose not to get married, if you
mhm,
want to be single for the rest of your life, you should have every opportunity when it comes to business and your financials. I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying, like, let's go backwards in history when it comes to women's
no.
rights and equal treatment. But if you are electing to be in a relationship, again, a heterosexual male female relationship, there is just by nature a certain dynamic that is what works for both people's happiness. And I have lived the reverse of it, and it was miserable, and I was so unhappy. So I feel like that's why I can sit here and say, no, I can see every person who's happy in their relationship. I see why it's working. He's the provider. She's the
Mhm.
nurturer. She's taking care of the kids. She's taking care of herself, actually, first, is what I always notice.
Yes.
She's taking care of
Yes.
herself. She's happy. She's
Yep.
working out. She's really healthy. Therefore, she's healthy and happy taking care of the kids. Therefore, he is like, wow, I've got like such a nice home environment because my wife's happy.
Yes.
The kids are happy. My house is
Yes.
nice. I have a beautiful partner. She's fun. We get to, like, I provide these great vacations and great holidays, and they're all so happy. They're all so
Yes.
happy. Like, that's the
Yes.
dream. He feels like he has a
Absolutely.
purpose. He says, "My purpose is taking care of my wife and these kids, and in return, she's taking care of herself to take care of the kids and give him a happy life." And
Yes.
I mean, that's what your life is, so you're very happy, so
Okay, listen, we're not jinxing my marriage, so I don't like to talk about it too much here. You know, I'm very superstitious when it comes to that stuff. I prayed for that man. God gave me more than I ever could imagine, but let's be
Aw,
honest, marriage is hard work and you have to choose each other every single day. It's so easy to get into a funk and be like, think the grass is greener on the other side, and to just think like, oh, it would just be so much easier with somebody else. And marriage is hard. I think being divorced is hard. I think being single is hard. All of it is hard. But when you find the right one, it's beautiful. But you've worked on yourself so much for the past 3 years. And I just love that you're giving people this advice because I think it's really, really important. And I am with you 100%. We are not saying go backwards. I love my successful women. My mom is a very successful woman, and I feel like women should be educated and successful and do all of the things they want to do, but it's just that much sweeter when you have the right partner. Don't you agree? Like, that's what makes it so beautiful.
Well, and I think that's just it is like wanted somebody, I needed somebody to tell me don't settle. I mean, that's the mentality I'm in right
Yes.
now is I will not settle. Like I will continue my business, working hard, providing the life that I've created for my kids by
Mhm,
myself, but I know what I ultimately want.
mhm,
And I think any woman out there, like we've can admit, like we're human. Like I made a mistake. I set up the wrong power dynamic in my marriage. It didn't work. There's a reason it failed. I hope I can be a cautionary tale instead of somebody thinking, "Oh, I'm going to do this and it's going to work out and I'm going to be, happy." Like no, I hope it is a cautionary tale for young women out there of
mhm.
don't settle. Wait for the one who's going to work his tail off for you and then for your future kids. Like, there's so many people that I've potentially put at risk now because it's not only my unhappiness, but then my kids. Like, the biggest factor to children being happy is a happy mother. Well, since I
Mhm.
wasn't a happy mother in that marriage, that's not what's good for my kids, right? Which is why I decided to leave it
Right.
and try to find happiness on my own. And I'm doing all this on my own. But again, it's just not the ideal situation. And I just don't want anybody to settle for anything less than when it could just be, again, like taking care of yourself. That is like the best thing you can do. Love on yourself, take care of yourself, be the best you can be. And in that time, you need a little patience. You need a lot of patience sometimes. It is lonely, it is hard. And sometimes there are going to be people that you think, oh, could this be it? And then God makes sure you know. God makes sure He makes sure you see that red flag. You know what I mean? If you're paying attention, He makes sure you see
Yes.
it and you know. And so that can be really frustrating because you're like,
Mhm,
it felt like I was getting close to it, kind of a thing. But
mhm,
I know that this is so much better than where I would have been had I stayed.
mhm,
And I know that either way, God is God has always taken care of me. I've always made it through every trial and tribulation. Like I've always been okay. Any hard moment, any lonely moment, any difficulty, any struggle, I've always made it through.
mhm.
So,
Yes, and it's beautiful, and you have. And whenever for the divorced ladies out there or the people who are single, if you think about how lonely it is right now, think about how lonely it was in that marriage, and to me, I could not imagine feeling lonely while being with somebody. So to me, it's like, yeah, dating can you can become impatient, you can feel lonely, but I feel like feeling alone in your marriage is 10 times worse, and you've gotten over the hardest part. Girl, you got this. You wait a little bit longer. Listen, it's we're thawing. You see this sun? It's beautiful. There's gonna be men everywhere. You have nothing to worry about. They're everywhere. They're everywhere.
well, again, I don't need a ton. I just need the one. I need the one
The
who's
one.
ready for
One.
marriage and looking for, the stay-at-home mom wife who's gonna make life really happy for him. That's what I'm looking
You're
for.
gonna speak it into existence. I just know it. The perfect person is coming, and you've got me. So I'm gonna make sure none of the dusty men, even if they just happen to get through, I'm not gonna allow it. I will see them coming. You will see them coming. Like we got you.
Well, don't
Fine.
you feel like that's already happened?
Yes, the way
Like
they cleared out
whenever
Brie.
whenever I pray the prayer of like, God, clear anything out that is not for me and make way for what is for me, they're gone in like a day. In a
Mhm.
day. It will like change overnight. I'm like, okay. Hmm. It's a
'Cause see, I'm
scary
working
prayer to
double
pray,
time.
especially if like you're feeling good about something. It's a scary
Yes.
one.
Yeah, because they will God will give you what you need, not what you want. So you might think you really want that man, but if God knows he is going to hurt you or ruin your progress or he's not the one, that man is out of there. But this is where I say I work double time because every man that God has cleared, wasn't I like, I'm not sure if I like him. Let's see. Let's see how this plays out.
I
It's my
mean, your friends
superpower.
know, like I mean, I will, and I'll say this too. I think for any women in that really vulnerable state, if you have friends that are brave enough to tell you, like, I don't think this is good for you, because it takes some bravery. A lot of times your
Yeah.
friends will be like, I'm just going to let her learn her lesson on her own. They're like, I'll be there to support her, but she'll learn the lesson on her own. I think it takes a really brave friend to be like, I think you're making a mistake, or like, I don't think you're seeing this. Like, I'm concerned. And usually when you are eyes clouded by love, you're like, no, like even how you were saying on the one podcast about like when you tell somebody that they're being cheated on, they're like, no, they shoot you
Yeah.
down, even if you have the proof.
Yes.
They're like, no, in denial. When you
I
are
know.
clouded by love, you're in this weird defensive denial place. And I fully admit I was wrong in that, because they were right. They saw it and I was clouded and I didn't see it and I made some mistakes.
Mhm.
And I'm so thankful that I had friends like that, and like friends like you who I feel like will just say it like it's like, "It might hurt your feelings, but I'm saying it anyways." Even though at this point I'm like, "Nope, like we're just gonna be real. Like this is what it
You
is what
do.
it is." Like
Yeah, you call me, you're like, "Ashley, straight up tell me, what do I need to do?" I'm like, "Okay, give me the whole rundown." You're good
yeah.
about that though, but most people are not that far into their, journey of self-healing, self-help, all of that, where they're just aware of everything that is going on, willing to listen to their friends. But honestly, it's nobody's fault. How can you see what's going on when that man is 2 inches from your face and he's beautiful and he has abs? Like, of course you don't understand anything that's really happening. He's getting through all your senses, and that's where you need a friend, somebody that you trust who can tell you, like, there's something about this guy. I can't put my finger on it, but I'm not sure that I like it. And if it's a good friend with good intuitions who has a good life themselves, then you should just take it into consideration. Even if you don't act on it immediately, like you said, we've all been there. We've all dated a guy where we knew going down that road that was not a good idea and we did it
Yeah.
anyways. And it
Mhm.
always ends the same. So if you're in a situation like Brie, where you want to get married and you're taking your dating seriously, really lean on your friends. They will help you.
And you're even family, you know what I mean? Like, either way, like, whoever
Oh,
loves
yeah.
you, if
Family?
they're, like, really looking out for you,
Yep,
like, they're looking out for you.
I
I
agree.
saw this thing, and again, I think this is everybody's beliefs are a little different, but it really resonated with me that, it was saying that our souls are usually placed with the same 10 to 15 people, like, in each lifetime. So this is, like, if you believe that you've had, like, past lives or anything like that. And sometimes those souls will change roles. So, like, your mother now might have been your sister in another life. Or I think you even saying this, was it you're saying
Yes.
Bianca acts like a mini
No,
mom?
Aubrey.
Aubrey
Aubrey.
acts like a mini mom to you.
Yes,
And that's why I was like, maybe in a past life she was your mom. And that's why she's very like protective over you.
she is,
But
and she's so
I think,
bossy.
like, your best friends and your family, that's, like, if you believe in it, that's been your soul family through a couple go-arounds, and they probably are saying it because 'cause they're looking out for you. Like, either they've seen you
Mhm.
make this mistake in a past life or they've seen you make this mistake before, and they're gonna, try to protect you, because that's why we're all here together, is look out for
I
each
love
other.
that. I
Yeah.
love that, Brie. It's such a good way to look at things, and I'm telling you, when you told me that about Aubrey, I told her immediately, and we both just looked at each other like, "That makes a lot of sense." 'Cause
Oh my
Aubrey, I mean,
gosh.
she's the oldest child just like I am, and I feel like oldest child, daughter, firstborn in the family, they're always, the bossy one, but I'm like, "Man, I really feel like," and she's taller than me too, which isn't saying much because you guys know I'm short, but she's taller than me, so I really feel like she thinks she's my mom sometimes. So, it's super helpful.
Oh my gosh. I know I was talking to someone the other day too, and he actually was like, yeah, sometimes I feel like my sister and I have said this, like my mom, like not in like a creepy sexual way, but sometimes she acts like she was like my husband, or like I was her husband or something. And
Okay.
I was like, maybe in a past life you were her husband. And it's like,
Oh, interesting.
yeah.
Isn't it?
I do remember that when I first moved back from Hawaii and I was getting the security system from the Hawaii house changed to this house, I was on the phone with the girl from Vivint, and she was asking me, she's like, "Oh, like, why did you move from Hawaii to Ohio?" And I was like, "Oh, a divorce." And I don't know why, like, we were kind of like in like a holding. She was like waiting for something else to happen. So we were just chatting and she's like, "Oh, I'm divorced too." And she's like, "Get ready." She's like, "The hoe phase is real." And I was like, "The hoe phase?" Because I'd never heard of that before. Do you know
I
what that is?
I feel like I have heard some clients, yes, get divorced and they just go wild.
Like
Absolutely wild.
sexual exploration. And that's what I will
Yes.
say. Like, I saw another thing and I agree with this. I don't like it being called the hoe phase because, like, what is it
Yeah.
called for men who get divorced? Like, we're not calling
No.
them anything.
Men being men. Yeah,
Right.
so we are definitely not making it negative. No, it's not a whole phase, it's
Yeah. But again,
sexual
that was just like the term
exploration.
she used with me on the
Yes.
phone. And I'm like,
Oh, yeah, girl talk.
again, for like a woman like the one on Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, she probably
Yeah.
needed to have a little sexual exploration
Yeah,
phase. You know
poor
what I mean?
girl. Yes.
Yeah. And not be called a hoe for it, like,
No,
ah,
not right.
but, I think the biggest thing in all of this is like it is actually a psychologically studied thing. Um, and it's actually like if anybody's widowed, this happens too.
Okay.
In particular, when I looked into it, it's like, let's say somebody was sick for a long period of time before they're passing. So the spouse, probably same as a divorce, you have like a year or 2-year buildup of knowing I'm not going to have a partner anymore. So it's almost like in your mind, you've kind of built up this, not necessarily fantasy, but like sexual desires been building up because you're not having it for that period of time.
Yes.
And so then
Yes.
when it happens, there's so many emotions that you're flooded with that, of course, as a human, like in times when we're sad and times when we're lonely and heartbroken and also a little bit angry, like, there's makeup sex for a reason. Like when you're feeling all these emotions, right? Like sex
Yep.
is a very like natural release for a lot of feelings. And so, whether you're divorced, widowed, whatnot, there is a psychological period, like especially for what is it called, widow's fire. But there's like a period you go through after that where your sexual like hormones are just raging. They're raging. Like you're gonna feel
Okay.
like, yeah. So
That's so interesting.
well, and I feel like I remember somebody
It makes
saying this
sense.
to me too when my dad passed away, because for some reason I think it might have a lot to do with grief. Like now that I'm thinking about it, they were like,
Okay.
"Oh, be careful. There's a lot of grief babies." Like after like a family member passes
Really?
away, kind of a
Okay.
thing. So again, there's something psychological. I'm sure we could Google it and find more
Oh,
clear
yeah.
cut answers. But I would just say my point in all of this is you are probably going to be feeling like I think it's obviously a thing. You're going to be feeling that way, but just know again, you have the portal to heaven between your legs. Love yourself, respect yourself, and I just hope you have fun and enjoy all the sex after divorce and that it is nothing but
Yes.
good and pleasurable and fun and yeah, I wish you
Yes.
all the best. All the fun.
And
Whether it's by
listen,
yourself or with someone.
exactly, by yourself or with someone.
Definitely, if you have any questions you would like for us to answer on the podcast or other topics you would like for us to dive into or anything we talked about today you want us to talk more about, let us know. We are so appreciative of every listen, every view, every subscriber. Thank you for the 5-star reviews and the comments that you leave. And if you haven't left one, please do. It's so helpful. And I hope that you enjoyed today's episode, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye.